Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. What organizations should understand about applying for tax-exempt status. IRS Tax Tip 2021-97, July 7, 2021. Organizations that want to apply for recognition of tax-exempt status under Section 501c3 of the tax code use a Form 1023 series application. There's a link to the Form 1023 series applications here. Here are some tips to help them understand the process. The application process on IRS.gov, IRS.gov, the IRS website includes a step-by-step guide explaining how to apply for tax-exempt status. Form 1023 series applications for recognition of exemption must be submitted electronically online at Pay.gov. There's a link to Pay.gov here. The application must be completed and include the user fee. Some types of organizations don't need to apply for Section 501c3 status to be tax exempt. These include churches and their integrated auxiliaries and public charities with annual gross receipts normally no more than $5,000. An employer identification number is a 9-digit number that the IRS assigns to identify a business tax accounts. Every tax-exempt organization should have an EIN as well. So that's going to be, of course, a number that the IRS kind of identifies the organization as. So it says employer identification number, which would indicate that you would only need it, in conjunction with being an employer. Don't let that confuse you, because that's kind of like the social security number of the business or organization, in other words, as well. So even if, it's more than just an employer-related type of thing, generally it's going to be the number that's going to be used to assign the organization. So even if they don't have any employees, so their EIN must be included on the application. Organizations can get an EIN by calling 800-829-4933. There's a link to that here. That number is here, and there's a link to it. So there'll be a link to this in the description if you want to check that out. And there's also the apply online. So it should be a fairly easy process generally if you have the organization to get the basically EIN number set up. So you can look into that. Again, there's a link to the apply online here as well. The effective date of an organization's tax-exempt status depends on their approved Form 1023. If they submit this form within 27 months after the month they legally formed, the effective date of their organization's exempt status is the legal date of its formation. If an organization doesn't submit this form within these 27 months, the effective date of its exempt status is the date it files Form 1023. So generally, it usually would be easier than if you have a new organization, of course, to get the exempt status to apply to the start of the organization. So you'd like to get it in there and make sure that that is the case. Otherwise, you could have a situation, of course, that you have part of it as exempt and part not exempt, and that could cause confusion, especially with regards to taxes and whatnot, and the record keeping that might be necessary under the two. So if it's a new organization, make sure that you get the thing set up so that you could basically start it right from the start. So once the IRS determines an organization qualifies for tax-exempt status under the law, it will also be classified as a private foundation unless the organization meets the requirements to be treated as a public charity. There's a link to public charity here. A charitable organization must be certain documents available to the public. So if it's a public organization, part of the idea of it being public is that you need more transparency. And notice if you're talking about anything that's, when you're looking at charities or government type of organizations that don't have the profit motive involved, then more transparency is usually required in those kind of instances. And if it's going to be something that is public, meaning possibly getting donations and whatnot, financing and donations and whatnot from the public, then that requires even more of a need for transparency so the public can trust that they're giving something to a legitimate organization that's doing what they're saying they're supposed to be doing. So these include its approved application for recognition of exemption with all supporting documents and its last 3 annual information returns. See Publication 557, Tax-Exempt Status for your organization. There's a link to that here for additional information on public inspection requirements. More information can be found at the links below. We have applying for exemption, frequently asked questions, Form 1023, frequently asked questions, stay exempt tax basics for exempt organizations public disclosure and availability requirements, frequently asked questions, and the disclosure requirements. There's links to all that. And great information and reading material here for your reading pleasure. There'll be a link to this in the description.